everyone, and welcome back to another part in this character creation series. And today I want to look a little bit more at the eyes in particular and set up a hopefully very good looking shader for them. So in the last part we of course did a little bit of modeling around the eyes to create some shapes which are projected onto the surface, but you know, in the end I'm not sure if I like it all that much, I have to admit. But I have a new solution and I think it's going to be great. So I would like to show you how that all works. Now it is going to be shader based, and this is just a little bit of a preview here. I would like to do something that has sort of parallax effects, something like this here, where depending on the view you get sort of a depth perception, and it sort of slides even towards the back as you view it from the side. If you were to disable this sort of depth, it would sort of stick here in the front. So this, well, I should probably reset all of them. So this is now what it would look like if it was just a texture on a plane. So that looks a little bit boring, but by giving these different elements, so different depths, you can really bring it to life in a way. So it's going to be tricky, and I know that some of you might worry about, well, how are you going to do this in a different software like Maya or Unreal? But if I get to it, I will demonstrate that in Unreal Engine at some point. I'm not sure if I'll get to that, but at least I would like to. And you can still make this in Blender and render it out as a texture, so in the worst case you can still just use it as a texture. But anyway, I mean, you can replicate this in different tools. It is not really something too unique to Blender, so yeah, that's what I would like to get into. And to start, I think we'll need a little bit of a different geometry on the face. So currently we just have the shape of the eye, but I would like to make a plane that's a little bit bigger, so that we can actually get these sort of depth effects working well. So here's a new object, just a plane. We'll move it into the front again as we did before. Just make sure you grab all points. And I'm just going to drop this here now around where the eyes are. Should be a little bit bigger than the eyes are actually, something like this. Just make sure it's centered right around where the eye is. And I think I want to be careful that it doesn't go outside of the silhouette. We'll be using a similar setup once again, so I'm going to use the shrink wrap modifier. We'll set that to the upper body low, so the face mesh. And I'm also going to set this to project. So it seems like I made a copy of the geometry. Yeah, this is supposed to be a plane. Sorry, never mind. Here, it's just a plane, so here check negative and positive, then it should snap like this. And just make sure you have the right axis also selected. In my case, it's the y-axis, it seems. Actually, we can just disable that, and then it's going to use the normal direction. So that actually helps. We could, for example, yeah, let's try that actually. Move it like this, and then it's going to fit around even nicer, and we have more opportunities for adjustment. So yeah, make sure it doesn't go over the center line. I think that's also a point to kind of keep in mind a little bit. But it should be quite large, something like this. And finally, I want to add a few subdivisions to it. I think that was a little bit too much, but maybe this much seems okay. Now, just to distribute these points evenly, I'm going to use my loop tools, hit spacing here, and do the same for the other direction. And I think we need another one down here. So let's do this again. So now it looks quite even. And as usual, or as we did before, oh well, first of all, make sure you set this to shade smooth. That will be important. And then I'm also going to adjust the offset a little bit, just so that it's not on top of the outline mesh, but a little bit more inside. Just make sure it doesn't intersect sort of with anything inside. I mean, the eyes are not so important for now, like these meshes, they're going to go soon, but just like that. Alright then, next what you want to do is to fix the UV mapping, so that's a little bit distorted at the moment. To fix that, just hit U and use unwrap. Now we have to check if that's the right orientation, so this part is down here. So I'd like to rotate that by 90 degrees now. We can actually do this around the 2D cursor. Hit 90 degrees and move that up a little bit. So we have our UV set up. And finally, I'm just going to add a little bit of a mirror modifier here, just so that we can see what we're doing on both sides. So it's going to be a little bit tricky to work on this now, because obviously, yeah, it's a mesh kind of snapped onto the surface of our face and we can't see anything. But let's get started at least with our shader now. As usual, this is going to be emission shader, and here we're just going to plug in the colors that we need. Actually, we do have to add another shader in Blender, specifically in Blender though, because we want to have transparency, and this shader of course doesn't have any transparency inputs. So you'll also need a transparent shader, and we'll make this work quickly because, as you can see, right now it doesn't do anything even if we change it to black. So you have to go to your material settings here and change this to, we can use alpha clip, blend mode, this here. Yeah, okay, you needed to have it white for it to work, but without this setting, of course, it doesn't work. So make sure you have this set to alpha clip on both of them, and now you have the ability to make it transparent, so to say. Now, you don't want it to be completely transparent, of course, so this is where you would now create a mix shader, and you mix these two shaders. Now, basically, you have the ability to choose here where it is transparent and where it is emissive. Now, you might have noticed that this is not like blending between them. That's because I set it to clip. That's something that's also cheap and easy to get in Unreal Engine, so that's why. But you could also use alpha blend, and then you could have sort of half transparent areas and such. That's just for you to know. But let's set that back to alpha blend. Sorry, no, alpha clip. And then the first thing that I want to do will be to set up the sort of the shape of the eyes. Now we have to separate this into elements, and to be honest, the trickiest one is the one that sort of is the eye shape itself, because that one isn't just like a round shape. It has a little bit of a shape to it. So what I think I'll do is I'll base that on a texture, but we still are going to use the depth effects. So it's all going to be a bit tricky, but we have to start somewhere. Maybe let's begin by creating a new texture, because I think we'll need that for what I'm planning to do. So just hit the X there, hit new here. I'll set that to reg eye shape. We don't need too much resolution, but I'll keep it somewhat high. Just actually 512 should be fine. It's just a black-white mask basically. And just so that we can see it, let's load it in here as well. Texture, image texture, reg eye shape, and set that to linear. And we'll just plug that into here for now, so that you can see what it does. Also, I think I want to change the order of this, because then black will be transparent and white will be visible, so it's more like an opacity mask, easier to understand. Let's just make sure we are here in image editor on paint, and here we go into texture paint, and we can't see it well here, but actually I think we could try to paint on top of this. Yeah, that's actually nice. We can just trace the shape now. That makes placement really easy. I still have some brush settings to fix, so let's set that back to dots. No, actually I think it was space. And I have here a little bit of brush stabilization, but that should just help. So I'm using my brush now to draw that carefully. Also looking at a different reference just to get the shape right. I think here I'm going to go a bit further down than I did before. Then I'll bring it back to here. Alright, now we just need to fill it. I think the shape is good. Could also fill it on this side, maybe that's easier. Oh, I did leave the outline a little bit. I just want to be careful not to, you know, go over the bounds, because the outline is very pretty when it's done with one stroke. So I'd like to keep that if possible. There we go. I mean, in the worst case, just export that and do it in a different application, whatever works for you. But as you can see, now we have the shape of the eyes on there, but it just replaces basically what we have. Let's clean up this a little bit while we're at it. I would like actually to have this on top for now, because we're not doing the eyelids just yet. So I will go in here into this mesh and set the offset a little bit so that it's on top, a little bit higher. So that way we can just, you know, get a better impression of what the eye actually looks like at the moment. Now this lower part is a bit unfortunate because of course it's in the way. Maybe we can just adjust this instead then, so that we can get a good idea of what it looks like. So is that correct? Looks alright. So I looked a little bit at the references, and I think this is closer to what it would look like. But anyway, this is a texture now, so you can easily adjust it. Let's just make sure to save that properly as a texture. Save as, and then just save it. Now let's go back to our eyes. Here we have our texture. This is apparently back to sRGB, so let's set that to linear. And now we'll work within that to set our texture. But for now we still need to add the parallax effect, because this is still just projected onto the mesh, and that's not quite what we want. So we're going to use a similar technique to the one that we used when we created the rim light here. So the first thing you need is a geometry node. We'll use the normal output here. Just as a reminder, the normal output gives you sort of the direction of the face in world space. We then use a vector transform, set that to camera, and what that does is it gives you sort of the direction of the face related to the camera. We just need to make sure, by the way, that the facing direction of the faces is correct. So let me just confirm that quickly. In here, I believe. Just go to solid material preview, maybe. Oh, okay, here it is. Face orientation, and if it's all blue, let's just move this out a little bit. Where's our? This is it. Okay, it seems like it's correct. Just wanted to make that sure, because this could be an issue. This side should be red. This is blue. Okay, that's fine. Alright, now that that's confirmed, we can go back to the rendered view for the better colors, and now we need to basically, you see what you get is, if you look straight onto this image, you'll get a color of, well, black, which should be right at 0, 0, 0. Actually 0, 0, 1, but we only need the red and green channels, because the red is going to be in this direction, how much you turn, and green is going to be in this direction, how much you turn. Blue is also in this, and we of course don't need the blue channel, so what I want to do next is to use here on a vector, we could use actually when you convert to the vector math, and you just multiply that by 1, 1, and then 0, so that we filter out basically the blue component of this output. So this is going to be our sort of main module for getting the correct vectors for doing a transform. And I'm sorry, I didn't really explain how this works, did I? So basically, a texture is mapped onto mesh by using a UV map. So let's bring up our UV map. This is just some coordinates, and we can actually visualize that too. Let's just plug this in here, I believe. And what you can see here is that any point that's here in the bottom will be black. Everything that's over here will be red. Anything that's up here will be green. So this is just the red channel, and this is the green channel, and in the middle you just get the mixture of these colors. So every point on this map, on this square, has a color, a unique color, and that's the one that you can see here. But basically, if we use this color, and that's the input for the texture, so the texture will be placed based on this information. And if we now transform or simply just add a little bit to this or remove a little bit from this, we can now shift it around. So if we were to use, let's see, vector, let's do the vector math again, and this time we'll just add this vector that we have here. And you can see as we go around, it now shifts around a little bit. And basically, to choose the amount of it, we would need another one here and just scale the vector basically. If this is set to 0, then it's going to be as is, so this should be not affected at all. It's the same because we add 0 to it basically. And if we turn this up, we get really strong effects that really shift around the texture, so to say. So basically, this is going to be plugged in here. And I must admit, it's a bit hard to follow, and it's probably easier to understand if there were some visualizations, but try to wrap your head around this, then you're very good. So yeah, so here you can see it shifts around. The only issue is that, of course, you get the repeats on the other side. Oh, here actually we can set this to clip. Alright, so that's the easiest way. So you can just do that in the texture sampler. Yeah, and that solves it pretty well. Just set it to clip and it's done. Right, so you can see already our texture shifts quite a lot, and on the other side here it doesn't seem to work all that well. Now let me try to apply the mirror modifier and try to figure out what the reason is for that. We have to go to the UV editor quickly. And could have something to do with the fact that this is turned around basically. Yeah, so right, some error. That's never nice. So I think we'll have to a little bit later figure out a way how we can actually basically flip the logic. We might have to change our math up a little bit, but I'll look into that and tell you basically the answer next time. I'm not doing these shader things every day, so it's going to be a bit tricky from time to time. Anyway, let's set this back to something low here, and you can see this is roughly going to be what we want. Based on our position, this is going to have a little bit of a depth perception to it, and that makes it so that when we look from this side, that the eye doesn't look this boring, so we can give it sort of this offset inwards and give it this depth that makes it almost look like the eye is sort of inside of the character. And you know, one more thing that's really good is with this technique is that you can basically use this now later on any mesh. If we decided that we don't want this to be on this separate piece of geometry, we could basically just UV map the head onto this and make it work right in there directly on the face mesh. But that's something for later as well. Alright, so we have set up now our main shape. At this point I think we can go ahead and hide this old eye shape that we had. And I think we even don't need these anymore. Although they might be a good size comparison. But anyway, let's remove that for now. And one more little issue is that since this is sort of slightly rotated from the front view, the eye will already be pushed inwards. So I would say that to fix that, we could simply move the mesh a little bit over. To be honest, I think that's going to be the simplest solution. And I think we might even have to scale it a bit to the side because it got sort of squished a little bit. So I'm adjusting that manually like so, but then the rest should be handled by the shader itself. You can just make sure that the initial setup is alright. So yeah, so now you have already quite some depth to this, and of course if it's too strong you just set this to something lower, and this still has quite a lot of depth, but it looks a bit more natural now. And the eyes are going to have a lot more depth to them, so that's what we're going to do next. The eyes though are just nice round shapes, so I believe we could try and make them procedurally. So we'll leave the setup as it is here for now. Move this over a little bit. So here are our two shaders. And yeah, we don't need this connected anymore. Alright, it's going to be quite tricky to manage this cleanly also, so I'm probably going to do some cleanups as well as we go. Alright, so we need a next module now, which is going to be the basic shape of the eye, and we can do this we can do this by painting a texture, but if we do textures, it's going to be also a bit more work than we need to, and it's going to be difficult to adjust. So instead I want to use here a texture, a gradient texture. And a gradient texture is again just a gradient, but you can choose what kind of gradient you want. We can use a spherical gradient, for example, or a radial if that is any better, or a quadratic sphere. Maybe we take this. I'm not sure what the best gradient is. Actually, we can. It should be fine. But the thing with the gradient texture is that if you imagine that gradient texture was here on the UV editor, it's centered around this point and it goes around like here, so we only have really a quarter of the texture on the image. So we first need to position it nicely. And to do this, I'm going to use here a the mapping node. And here you have pretty good control over the of course you don't do that on the output. You have to do that on the UV map. So here, usually this is connected by default like so, but now what we want to do is we use that and now we transform it. We can now shift it around, left, right, up, down with these two numbers, and we can scale it here and here. I think we have to go higher to scale it. So I want to use something like 3, 3 on these two, and now position it with this to be in the right position from the front view. And this is just going to be the center. So so to visualize better now what the size of this is going to be like, this is still a gradient, right? The next thing you want to do is to use a converter math node and set this to greater than. So now we can select a threshold, and something like 0.5 should be just fine, because then we can work on our scale on this here. For example, I'm going to scale it up like so. Yeah, one thing we can do also, this is a bit difficult to adjust because as we scale it, it just shifts around. So we can split this up into two nodes, and we're just going to keep this on 0 on the first, and do the scaling on 1 on the second. So this is now going to be still doesn't seem to quite work, does it? Wait, I'm curious now why that should be working. Now we don't see anything. Probably the threshold. Give me a second. So set this back to 1 and 1. So this scales it this way. This scales it that way. So this is centered. Now if we move it around, like so, let's bring this into the center. Yeah, okay. Maybe I'm a bit mistaken. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. But anyway, with these two numbers you can push it around. I'll also look into this maybe a bit later. I would have liked if that was sort of not connected, if I could just scale it first and then move it around. But apparently there's a reason why that doesn't work. So yeah, this is just going to be set to 2 and 2 maybe. Now we just need to find it again. And no idea what it could be. Let's just turn it off for a moment until we find it. Alright, there we go. It's at -1 roughly. Now we should be able to use that. Alright, now we have to scale it down a little bit though. So I'm setting this to 4 and this has probably to go to -2, so that's a bit too thin. So yeah, it's a bit of back and forth, it's a little bit annoying. Set that to 2.5 maybe, and that has to go back up to -1 a bit. Alright, and now we're getting somewhere with this. I wonder if we can also rotate this. Okay, rotation is probably going to work a bit differently, but that's okay. Let's not worry about that for now. And now the size of the eye we can change with this value as well, so I can make it bigger and smaller. I think this size is okay. And I just want to adjust the position a little bit to be sort of in the lower corner here, because that feels more like the design that I'm going for. But as you can see, this is still sort of snapped onto the plane, and this could be a good thing if you want that sort of effect, but I think it looks a bit weird in this case. So what we'll do is, again here now in between, we have to once again do a setup like this, where we basically take these two nodes, then we put this into here and this into here, and now we'll reuse this module and plug it in there. Now we can just scale it as far as we want, and that's just going to be sort of the depth of the eyes. And here we go, one more element is in place. Now it has this nice parallax effect, and I think it looks a lot more alive than just pasting a texture onto a plane. Of course, this is still looking very wrong, so what you might want to do next is to, well, first of all, we can use this, well, first of all, let's establish a base color, I would say. So let's create an input, RGB input, and put that into the emission. And we'll use our eye color here. Now, it's hard to pick the correct color from this, but something around here should be fine. Right, so this is our base color. We can as well go ahead and set up our shading. If you remember, in our skin shader, we multiplied whatever we had by this color to get sort of the shadow area. And I mean, we could even go ahead and pick up all the other things here. I think we need these 4 nodes. So let's go back to the eye, let's paste these. So we have a diffuse shader, get that, and basically our color has to go into here. We multiply it wherever there's shadow. That goes into our emission now. So now we have our shaded eye color, and just to check if that's working correctly, you can see now as we rotate the sun, the shadow nicely goes on top of that. Of course, we'll have to improve that a little bit later, but at least it works now. And I believe for the eyes in particular, we don't want too much of a red tint, so actually I'm going to turn it down a little bit. You can adjust that value here, but that is now a nicer color. The good thing about this setup now is that no matter what we plug in, actually let me just adjust this a tiny bit. no matter what we plug into the eye here now, it's going to be shaded based on that. I mean, we'll fix that. It's going to have its own issues, but it's good enough for now, just so that we can see the correct colors on this. Later we'll do some 3D shadow effects maybe to just get the shading right as well within. So here we have now our second element, which was the eye, and now we have to think about how we want to implement that. And basically, I think the best or easiest way to do that is to use here a mix RGB node and to use that as a mask. And here we can now choose the color of the eye basically, and that doesn't have to be a plain color as well. So I think we'd like to use a gradient for that to establish sort of this yellow to white transition. So for that we're going to need another gradient texture and we'll plug that in here for now. And of course with that, once again, we'll need to take a UV map and the mapping node and plug that in here, and with that we will sort of adjust the position. Now this time I think we have to rotate it, and so I hope this works now. If we just set that to, well, we can go 90 degrees this way as well. We don't need it to be scaled for now. We set that to 1. Let's see if minus 90 was better. Actually don't know if it makes much of a difference. And here we go. Now we have the gradient sort of in the right spot. I think we will scale this up a little bit so that the gradient takes up sort of the entire area nicely. And so now we have from black to white a linear gradient. I hope that this is done correctly, but we'll see in a moment, because basically now we can use this, and you could either use just a mix RGB node if you want, or you could use a color ramp. Basically if you plug this in here, you can now choose 2 colors and it will blend between those two. And I was thinking about something like this, where the bottom is white of course, and the upper part has this yellow. Because picking isn't too accurate, we can just go in and adjust it a little bit. Probably need to adjust that more later, but anyway. But I think maybe what's better will be to use a color ramp, because that gives us more control over the whole color range. Apparently we have to do it this way around. So here we use the yellow, which I'll try something like this, and here we'll use a white. And if you want to push this yellow down more, you could go in here and do this. And for now, I think that will be alright. Now, let's see. Again, if we want to shift around the eye now, I'm going to start naming this properly and managing this in a bit, but this kind of things can take a while, and I'm doing this on the fly, by the way. Let's do that. So it's a bit tricky to do this all as I go. To be honest, I'm also a little bit worried about these stretching effects as I do this offset logic. I believe this happens because the mesh itself is curved like that, and I didn't think about it too much. Yeah, and it makes a little bit of sense, because if this side is pushing in this direction, this side is pushing in this direction. If you imagine, it's going to squeeze it a little bit. But we have to just try to not overdo it. I think it will work out. So I just wanted to make sure that this is not too far pushed inwards. Maybe 0.1 will work. Yeah, so this is twice as steep as the top, I believe. Yes, so that's that. And I think in this video I want to add just one last module, which is going to be an outline. And for that we'll basically copy the setup that we already have here. Let's try to move this out of the way a little bit. And then, okay, we need this too. We have our gradient, our radial gradient, and instead of greater than now, so let me plug this in here so that you can see what I'm doing. Instead of the greater than node, I would like to use a color ramp. And here we'll set the third point to black again. So you can see we now have a ring. And this will set to constant. So now we have just a ring. And we can sort of put this on top of the eye. And we'll do this, so here we color it, and then we should maybe do that just afterwards. Mix RGB, use this as a mask, and this should go back to here. It's all very complicated, but there we go. And here we now set the color of the outline, which is going to be the same color as the one that we use here. And this color just needs to be plugged into here. So there we go. We do get a little bit of a cutoff now at the moment with the texture. Not too sure if that's what we want. If we would like to preserve the eye, for example, which does seem like a good idea. Let me just check quickly if the outline is inside or outside of the... Okay, it's on top, outside of that. We could just go ahead and increase this a little bit so that it goes right to the limit. Alright, and then here we just go and do color mix RGB, plug this into here, and we'll actually no, let's plug this into the mix part, and we'll use a white here. So this should now make it so that well, it didn't work obviously on the first try. Let's try it again. I'm temporarily going to use this here to see what I'm doing, and it does work actually. So no matter where the eye is, it should yeah, sort of add to the alpha, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I believe the only reason why we have this little step is because this value isn't accurate enough. If we go here a little bit higher, we should be able to get it just right. So yes, now the eye is on top, and we could have it stick out a little bit if we need to, but that is again something you just set depending on your needs. But yeah, that's going to be it for now. This is just the first part. We'll do a lot more polish and try to figure this out. I'm curious now, can we actually... There's so many, one thing after another that we can try to do. No, I don't think we can do that. Anyway, yeah, that's going to be it for now. Next, we're going to use more shapes to do the inner part, a little bit of shadow, some more gradient work in here. Then we also need to start to look at the shadows themselves. Like here, it would be nice to get a shadow that goes across here. We have a couple of elements to work on, and it's going to be a huge graph and everything, but the result is going to be great because you would even be able to sort of adjust the eye color with one parameter and change the position of the highlights, the size of the eye, and position and everything with parameters. So it would be really easy to animate and do all the effects that you need. Well, that is of course if I'm able to pull it off nicely. So I'll do some more thinking on that, and I'll see you in the next part.